What is going on, Cuse Nation? Welcome to yet another edition of Orange Heat. My name is Giovanni Heater, as always, and thank you for joining me. Today I have a few guests on my show from my sports media class back at school. Joey Penizotto, Austin Alberici, and Matt Klamm. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys.
Of course.
Pleasure.
So today we are here and we are going to talk about the Syracuse football players that were drafted and not drafted in the 2020 NFL draft this past Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. It was kind of an exciting weekend. A lot of things that were expected, like Joe Burrow going number one to going to the Dolphins. A lot of things that people could have called, and then some things that were unexpected, like 3 Ohio State players going in the top 3. Some cool stuff like that. But here today, we're here to talk about the Syracuse players going in this draft. Kind of an opportunity where Syracuse is putting themselves back on the map a little bit. The last few seasons have been a struggle with Syracuse players going to the league. A program with so much tradition where years ago we would have guys going every single year, cranking out prospects and legends in the NFL like Tyreek Hill, Harrison, McNabb, all these players. And things just aren't the same as of late, even backup quarterbacks like Ryan Nassib, but it hasn't been that way recently. But this is a good start. This is some proof that Dino Babers has Syracuse back on the map, and he's got guys here to stay, bringing in recruits, showing them that, hey, our guys can go to the league. You can have an opportunity to do that as well. So we're going to go through all the guys. 6 guys so far have been either signed to a team or drafted in the draft. And then we're going to go through some of the guys that maybe you'll get drafted, or not drafted, but sign in the coming days. We'll see. But let's kick it off here with none other than defensive end. Everybody knows him, Alton Robinson. Alton Robinson was drafted early on in the 5th round with the 148th pick to the Seattle Seahawks. I think this is a perfect fit for him. He finished the season for Syracuse with 46 tackles and 4.5 sacks. Joey, tell me what you think about this guy.
Well, just watching film, I realized that his motor is off the charts, and his size and speed really stood out to me. Because, like a big man moving like that is just plain old scary. Like, it's just simple as that.
Austin, what do you think about Alton?
He ran a 4.6 in the NFL Combine, so I think that just shows a lot for him.
Matt, any thoughts on defensive end Alton Robinson?
Well, since Seattle's losing Clowney, it looks like right now, I think Robinson, he's not going to come in and have the impact that Clowney had, but I think he can fill that spot and possibly have a good year in Seattle.
Absolutely. Alton Robinson, kind of a guy that has fallen off a little bit as of late, and he was a guy that was looked at as a possibly 2nd or 3rd rounder, falls to the 5th round. Now, that's higher than we expected him to go this year, but if you were having this conversation last year, people would have thought the 5th round was late for him. But again, he had that drop-off. You know, Matt, me and you talked about it earlier before the episode started. Went from 10 sacks last season to only 4.5 this year, and part of that's because Syracuse didn't have the same drive and the same intensity game in and game out when you have 10-win season on the line. That's because the offense didn't produce as well and didn't give the defense many opportunities. And that's also because he was getting double teamed because guys knew he was a top NFL prospect. What are your guys' thoughts as far as that drop-off goes, and how did that hurt his stock?
Well, when a player puts up that production in that season, he obviously stands out in the film room, and coaches prepare for him, because at the end, like, that can really just wreck your whole game plan. And I think teams pretty much just adapted to him because there was really no other threats besides Kendall Coleman on the D-line.
Joey, you talked a little bit about how athletic you thought his body was for being at the defensive end position. Can you talk about, do you think he's undersized for the NFL, or is he going to be just fine?
I think he's just fine because, I've seen him. There were some pretty big linemen blocking him, and he was just bulldozing them over. So, we'll see when he gets to the league, but I think he'll be just fine.
Absolutely. Now, Alton Robinson, probably the top draft prospect in this Syracuse frame as of right now, but we'll see how everything pans out once they get a season or two under their belt. But nonetheless, let's move on to the second guy drafted. I think this is another one that we expected, whether it was going to be in the draft or as an undrafted free agent. People weren't really sure, but that's nonetheless besides the point. It's punter Sterling Hoffrichter. He goes to the Atlanta Falcons, round 7, pick 228. Kind of an interesting little scenario. He goes with the same exact pick as Riley Dixon went a few years back when he went to the Denver Broncos. Punter you, Syracuse? I think so.
Sure.
So Sterling Hoffrichter, quite the year. I mean, he was super dependable down the stretch. He could boot the ball 50 yards plus. He could put that thing into the ceiling. He could pin you deep in your own territory inside the 5 guys. What is your thoughts on Sterling Hoffrichter?
As you said, Gio, he drafted by Atlanta, and they play in the Dome too. So I think that could be very beneficial for them. And I just wrote down, just watching him, it's just got to boot. He boots the ball. He bombs the ball.
Austin.
I don't think it can be any better because he's got his whole other league plays in a dome or is in nice weather, and that's perfect for him. Mm-hmm. He's not going to play in cold weather, so it's going to be perfect. He can hit it long.
Again, Austin talked about the rest of his league. In that league, you have Tampa Bay, you have Carolina, and you have the New Orleans Saints, who, again, play indoors. So, really, that probably went into this whole situation with him. And he talked about on a few podcasts that I listened to that Atlanta was probably going to be his spot. They were the most in contact with him throughout this whole drafting process. So that was the spot people really thought he were going to go. But again, playing inside a beautiful brand new stadium down in Atlanta, a place where the college football playoffs and national championship were played recently, going to be playing indoors. It's a perfect opportunity for him. The only thing I think with him is he's a little bit undersized, and that's why teams were a little afraid of him. Not your typical, Riley Dixon's a 6'3" athletic body. Sterling Hoffrichter stands at about 5'10", 5'11", so he's a little bit shorter of a frame. That's not exactly what you want when he's your latch-ditch effort as a guy's coming down the field on a punt return. But again, when you can boot it into the ceiling, it's hard to deny any of that. Matt, what are your thoughts?
So I was looking at his stats, and last year he had 69 punts, which is, I mean, it's a lot for a college punter, but he ended up gathering 3,026 yards, which is kind of crazy to think about. That's top tier in college and NFL level to have that much yards. And his longest punt was 65 yards, which is that's NFL level, even when he's in college. So I think he'll fit well in Atlanta.
Absolutely. He's got the big boot and he's got the accuracy. So again, Sterling Hoffrichter, 7th round, 228th pick to the Atlanta Falcons. Now moving on to the undrafted free agents, top of that list has to be none other than wide receiver Tristan Jackson, a guy that some people thought were going to get drafted and ended up not being in the actual draft itself. But he was one of the first pickups as soon as the draft was over, which people knew, again, if he wasn't drafted, that was going to be the scenario. He's going to be one of the first off the list. This was a really good year for wide receivers, so it was a tough battle that he was in. You had some top-tier wide receivers and guys like Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb. I mean, it was an elite class of wide receivers this draft. But again, Tristan Jackson goes to the Los Angeles Rams. He's going to be joining great company there, a team 2 years removed from a Super Bowl and an NFC championship, a team with some great receivers on that team in itself. He goes 66 receptions and 1,023 yards, 11 touchdowns last year for Syracuse. Joey, what are your thoughts on Tristan Jackson?
Well, he's not the biggest guy, but his size is very well for how he moves and how he runs routes. Again, this year, as we said before this, his route tree was very limited due to the protection and that scenario. So I think playing in LA with that offense will kind of open him up a little bit if he makes a team, which I think he will. And one thing I also noticed was after the catch, he's very dangerous after the catch.
It's true. He had some stiff arms, some shifty moves. He's definitely, when he gets some open space, he's deadly. So, Austin, what are your thoughts on wide receiver Tristan Jackson?
Redshirt junior, 6'1". He's 197. It's not bad, but, his prospect grade was a 6 in the NFL Combine, and that's not bad, but his speed is average, and I think after the catch he's pretty good. So,
Matt,
this season it really hurt him that he never got that chance to play under Dungy. DeVito, he had a solid year, but I think with pairing Jackson and Dungy would have done way more for his draft stock. I think he could have put up bigger numbers, but I mean, you can't go back now. He's signed. I think he'll make the team, like Joey said. So I think he'll have a good career.
Matt, I couldn't agree with you more with that whole Dungy DeVito thing. And it's interesting you say that. DeVito, as we know, struggled, wasn't exactly what we thought he was going to be. And the offensive line was part of that as well. Just kind of how the cards played out. The thing that fears me about Tristan Jackson is he was never that number one target this year for Syracuse like people thought he was. He was definitely the one receiver, but he wasn't dependable like you had your Steve Ishmael, like your Jamal Custis, or even your Amba Edetawo in years previously, and he didn't have that same size. You're talking about guys, Jamal Custis was 6'5", Tristan Jackson only 6'1". He's limited in his route running, but that's mostly because he only had so many plays where he had the time with the offensive line. We had a lot of things play into all this, but he had some drops down the stretch that you just kind of were head scratchers. So that's one of my fears for him, and we never really saw him go up one-on-one in high point of football. Everything was kind of on a slant. Everything was either that or he was wide open or a wide receiver screen. He never really had any opportunities deep down the field one-on-one. So we'll see how all this plays out. I think there's a spot for him in the NFL if he works hard enough, catches some breaks the right way, and gets some opportunities. I don't know that it's with Los Angeles due to how deep they are at the wide receiver position, but we'll see what happens. Now, moving on. Next, we have another defensive end, none other than the leader of the Syracuse football defense off the field. That's Kendall Coleman. Kendall Coleman, again, an undrafted free agent. He's going to the Indianapolis Colts, coming off of a season with 48 tackles and 4 sacks, very similar to Alton Robinson. Joey, what are your thoughts?
See, I play football here for the high school, and when we call those trenchmen, those linemen that like to get dirty and like to be physical and aggressive, we call them JYDs or junkyard dogs, and that's how you explain him. All I can say.
Austin.
Well, he played 44 games in his career, and including 12 in his freshman year. It was a 4-year starter. After 2 seasons, well, he didn't play that much, but he broke out his junior year, logging 10 sacks and 12 tackles for his loss.
Matt?
Similar to Robinson, I noticed, is they both finished 2018 with 10 sacks. And then I think teams kind of watched film and figured them out because they only posted numbers of 4 sacks and 4.5 sacks. So I think, like, as their NFL careers, if they do progress, they're going to have to continue to get better and continue to learn more moves in order to defeat that kind of film and figure them out. I think they're going to have to be able to adjust to that.
Absolutely. As I said, he had a season very similar to Alton Robinson, including the progression from 2018 to 2019. I think part of that, too, is the team didn't have the same jive, really. The offense was weird. The defense was on the field a lot more, which you would think would add up in more numbers, but fatigue plays into that. Just kind of an odd season for the defense. Nobody really had the same numbers they did the year prior. That's including guys like Andre Sisco, who, by the way, is going to be an NFL prospect we're talking about probably next year if he leaves after his 3rd year. But that's a conversation for another day. The thing about Kendall Coleman for me is that they're going to like, in contrast to Alton Robinson, is Alton Robinson had some behavioral issues or off-the-field issues, we'll say, was suspended from playing in the Camping World Bowl at the end of the 2018 season. He was suspended at his previous school for a time. Kind of some things off the field that cost him down the stretch, I think. Kendall Coleman, the exact opposite. A leader off the field, a person that teams are really going to want inside their locker room for a positivity boost. Kendall Coleman writes poetry in the off time. Like, he's just a great guy all around, and teams are going to like that. And the thing about the Colts, too, there's some Syracuse history there. Wearing number 44 at the linebacker position is Zaire Franklin, who played with Kendall Coleman for a couple of years at Syracuse. So they're already going to have that chemistry. And again, Steve Ishmael's also on that practice squad at the wide receiver position. They played together at Syracuse. Seems like Indianapolis kind of has some roots with Syracuse in the last couple of years. But now moving on from Kendall Coleman, we have another speedy wide receiver. This one surprised me a little bit. The water bug, Sean Riley. He's an undrafted free agent, and he goes to the New England Patriots. Joey, tell me about him.
Obviously he's fast, but the one thing that really stood out to me is his quickness and his quick twitch. He's like a little pinball out there. Like he's just bouncing around everywhere. And with the Pats, if any other team picked him up, as you said earlier, Gio, and we agreed on this, if any other team picked him up, I would be way more skeptical. But because it's the Patriots and how like they run things in their player development and everything, I think he'll be all right. I think they'll utilize him very well.
I couldn't agree with you more there, Joe. It's kind of a situation where Bill Belichick is known for taking these guys who people would think would have no chance in the NFL, typically from smaller schools, which Syracuse isn't necessarily. They do play in the ACC, but he turns these smaller guys, undersized guys, underrated guys, and turns them into stars in the NFL. Look at Julian Edelman. And speaking of Julian Edelman, there's talk that they're getting rid of him and trading him away. So it makes you wonder, under the same kind of size and stuff coming out of college, if Sean Riley's going to be that next man in at the slot wide receiver position, maybe not this year, but as they develop him down the road, just kind of something to think about. You never really know. And the other thing about Sean Riley is he's really good in the special teams. You can use him as a punt returner and a kick returner, as Syracuse did. Now, in the National Football League, I think he's a little undersized for that, because there's guys that are going to be coming at him twice his size at that point on the special teams unit. But again, some assets he has to him. Albert, what do you think about him?
Played every game at Syracuse. He started inside receiver, and he just shows you he had 64 passes for 756 yards and 3 touchdowns as a junior, and I think that shows it all.
Matt?
Similar to Tristan Jackson, I think his stats took a real blow when Dungy left and DeVito filled in. I mean, he had 36 catches for 275 yards and a touchdown a year ago. But I think where he really made his money, and I think where the Patriots caught eyes, is on the special teams and the punt return. Now, if he doesn't get bigger and he doesn't end up putting on weight and muscle to really compete with those guys at the next level, I think his money will be made at receiver. But you never know. I mean, he did a great job at Syracuse on the punt return. So if he can translate to the NFL, I think he'll be a solid punt return, a real weapon.
Awesome, Matt. Now, the last guy on our list here that did receive an opportunity so far in the National Football League, that's offensive tackle Evan Adams. Now, again, an undrafted free agent on the offensive line, but he goes to the Baltimore Ravens. Interesting here. Evan Adams really good in the run block department. He was really good at protecting Mo Neal at times. You saw our run game take a boost this season big time from the year previously with guys like Mo Neal in the backfield and Abdul Adams and Jarvian Howard and Jawar Jordan. The list goes on and on. Syracuse is getting really deep at that running back position, and Evan Adams helped with that on the offensive line. The thing with him, they did struggle with the pass defense and pass blocking there. A little bit of a concern there for him. I think it's going to be exciting to see clearly Baltimore trying to build around that Mark Ingram duo with Lamar Jackson. They're going to need protection down the stretch. You don't want Lamar running for his life, even though he's going to be anyways. That's the kind of quarterback that he is. But I think Evan Adams kind of fits in well there if he can get himself on the field. Joe, what are your thoughts on this guy?
Well, you said it perfectly. He's going to the right team. They like to run the ball, whether it's with the quarterback, the running back, even wide receivers, catching reverses and stuff. The Ravens are a perfect team for him. And, if he works hard, I have no doubt that he'll get on the team, get a spot, or at least get a spot somewhere else.
Or even a practice squad. Albert, what do you think?
I think he's great. He started every year at Syracuse, and he had 146 career knockdown blocks at Syracuse. And that's pretty good.
It's all about the cakes, baby.
Yep.
Matt, what are your thoughts on Evan Adams?
I think he might, since he was a good run blocker at Syracuse, I think where he might find trouble is the athleticism with Lamar. It might be kind of hard for him to keep up with Lamar and moving around a lot. But we'll see. Anything can happen. He can come back next training camp and be this athletic beast that we saw at Syracuse and be able to get out and block for Lamar to really push the ball downfield like the Ravens do in the run game.
Absolutely. Now we're going to go back, recycle through the list, and just name off who is our top guy to have success in the National Football League down the stretch? Who's a guy that in 3 or 4 years is still going to be hanging around and still going to have an opportunity? But first, I want to go through real quick and just name some guys that still have a chance. And sometimes it takes a couple weeks. Sometimes they're weighing out their options, seeing where their best fit is, what offers they have. You still might hear from some of these guys in the coming weeks, making a sign, trying to make a practice squad, trying to make a training camp. It's going to be a weird offseason. You might not have your summer camps and everything that they do. So it's going to be hard for these guys to find opportunities, but not impossible. And that's guys like Evan Foster. That's guys like KJ Ruff on the defensive line, Lakeem Williams at the linebacker position, who was phenomenal stepping into a role in his senior year, which he sat the bench his entire career until his senior year after guys graduated, finally got his opportunity and made the most of it. He had the most tackles on the Syracuse football team by far and away, blew everyone out of the water. He was good in the run defense. Then you have guys like Antoine Cordy, who played for Syracuse for 6 years. And then, of course, a guy that kind of surprised me that he hasn't been picked up yet is Mo Neal. He has great work ethic. Again, he had a breakout season this year. He was really close to 1,000 yards rushing. I think you're going to see out of all this little roster of guys here, I think Mo Neal has the best chance to hear some news in the coming weeks. So we'll stay tuned on him for sure. But guys, let's recycle through our list of guys that do have a spot right now and talk about who's most destined for success. So first, I want you to name your top 2 guys that you'd have to cut off this list that we probably won't ever see hit the field for real unless it's on a practice squad or something. What are your thoughts?
I'm going to go with let me think. This is tough. I'm going to go with Sean Riley and Kendall Coleman.
Okay. Interesting you say that. The defensive end position's tough, and again, Sean Riley really lacks the size.
Yeah.
Austin, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking Coleman because he's not as athletic as the guys in the NFL, and Jackson. I don't know. I think what the team he's on, I don't think he shows it, but what I see. But
okay.
That's my opinion.
Okay, and I think every Syracuse fan feels like, it might be a situation where he didn't necessarily blend in with the culture as well as we might have thought he would. I heard some things, some weird situations, off the field stuff he had. We don't have to get into all that, but maybe Tristan wasn't the best mesh, or maybe he was done doing schoolwork. It's not for everybody, and Syracuse is a tough place to be. I'm not saying he's not smart. We don't know, but it just kind of had a feel that he didn't want to be there sometimes. And again, he's going after 3 years. He really only played a couple of years in college, sat the bench at Michigan State, sat out a transfer year, played a year at Syracuse, and it was a good season. But you really feel like if he stayed another year and progressed some more, he would have had a better shot. There's some question marks with Tristan Jackson for sure. Matt, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to go a different route from you guys. I'm going to say Evan Adams is looking a little iffy to me, as well as Kendall Coleman. But I think that Ravens team, they really solidified their offensive line these past couple years with the years that Lamar and Ingram have had, especially last year. So I don't see him fitting in with that team. And then Coleman, I think he had a good junior year at Syracuse, but I think that senior year really hurt him. And I don't know about his NFL. He's not like an Elton Robinson that can really turn that next gear, like Joey said. But we'll see. It all depends on how they do this training camp and possibly this season.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you there, Matt. And actually, those are going to be my 2 picks as well. Again, I don't think they have that strong of a putting out. The 2 guys that I think without a doubt are going to make it are Sterling Hoffrichter and Olin Robinson. Still a little iffy for me, actually. Again, Tristan Jackson, I really don't think he's anything. I don't think he's as special and dependable as the guys that Syracuse has cranked out recently. And even those guys didn't have success. And those guys were 1 bigger, 2 faster, 3 stronger, and they were more dependable catching the football. And even they haven't really gotten anywhere. Again, Ishmael's on a practice squad, same with Amba Adetawa, but you don't see them playing every Sunday. So I don't think Tristan Jackson's going to have a spot. But my 2 guys that I say are probably definitely out are going to be Evan Adams, as Matt said. They're pretty set in their offensive line. And again, the offensive line struggled at Syracuse this year. And then I'm going to say Tristan Jackson. I'm going to go wide receiver Tristan Jackson for all the reasons I just mentioned. I would say Sean Riley, but again, he's going to the Patriots. If he's going anywhere else, I'm saying he's done, but he's going to the New England Patriots. They develop guys. So now let's talk about who's your number one, without a doubt, going to succeed, Joey.
Well, Gio, this might ruffle your feathers a little bit, but I'm gonna have to go with Christian Jackson because I believe watching him run after he got the ball, I mean, I thought it was pretty special. I just think he needed more volume. I think when he gets more opportunities in practice and coaches see him kind of come out of his shell and really like become the football player that like he can be. He's a 4-star out of high school, so like it's there. Like he's got the build, you know. I might not be with the Rams, but I think he'll find a spot in the league, and I think he'll play.
Hey, man, that's what this is all about. This is what a roundtable discussion's for. The best part is when we don't agree, right? Austin, what are your thoughts?
I was thinking, maybe you think I'm crazy, but Sean Riley, I think it
Really?
might be with the Patriots, but I think a lot of teams could take him. I don't know. He's fast. He's speed. He might be small, but I feel like there's a gap on each team that he could just light a spark in someone's team. I don't know why. That's just me.
Okay. All right. Matt, what are your thoughts, buddy?
I would at the beginning of this, I was gonna say Elton Robinson because Clowney would be leaving and he would be filling in. But I'm gonna have to agree with Joey and go against you and say Jackson. But I'm gonna add to the reasons why, and I know it's like it's a part of every sport. It's the injuries, and I think the LA Rams receivers like Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, and Reynolds, I think they kind of these past 2 years they've all struggled with injuries and they've all missed significant time. So I think if one guy goes down with one injury, I think Jackson could possibly take a receiver spot, whether it's on the outside like he was at Syracuse, or possibly the slot with his 4.5 speed. He could possibly play the slot and be a nice possession catch. But I don't know. I'm gonna have to go against you like Joey and say Jackson.
Wow. Okay, guys. Well, I'm going to have to tell you my guy, and I feel like a lot of people are going to agree with me on this one. It's going to be Sterling Hoffrichter, the punter.
Of course.
You know,
you.
I think he's the MVP of this Syracuse football team because he's the only guy that game in and game out, every play, he was dependable. And you knew exactly what he was going to do, and he did it the same way every time, and it was successful every time. He never shanked one out of bounds. That just wasn't him. He was dependable every single play to put it within the 20-yard line. And it doesn't sound like that, he could put it within the 5, and he did it plenty of times. But even just putting a ball inside the 20 is bad field position in itself. You have to march 80 yards, and he could do that every single time, no matter where they were on the field, basically. And again, you don't draft somebody that's a punter unless you have plans for him. The last guy to have that happen recently was Riley Dixon out of Syracuse. And again, they had plans for him. He was the starting punter right from the get-go in Denver. And then he had so much value in him that they traded him, and he's the starting punter with the New York Giants. They have faith in that guy. I feel like you don't draft a punter unless you know that you have a plan set for him. And I think the Atlanta Falcons are the perfect landing spot for this kid playing indoors. I got to say Sterling Hoffrichter, even though his size might beg to differ, he's at a really good spot. I think he's number one. And that's not any knock on Alton Robinson either. I think he's got a place in Seattle or maybe somewhere else. I mean, he's so physical. He has such speedy moves. And again, he dominated teams when he was at Syracuse. And I love watching him play. I'll never forget when he sacked Zarek Cooper, the backup quarterback for Clemson, and the dome erupted. He's just that good. But again, I got to say Sterling Hoffrichter. All right, well, that about wraps up our show, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Of course. Now, that is all we have for today. Go hit it up on the Twitter at Gio Heater. Go hit it up on the Facebook at Giovanni Heater. Go hit it up on the Instagram at Giovanni Heater, and subscribe to Orange Heat for more Syracuse action. But before we're out, let's go Orange, baby. Woo!
Yes, sir.